Kim, clap to sync the audio. Okay. That was funny. Alright, so we'll set up the mic right here.
Okay.
Just talk reasonably loud. So
Talk reasonably loud.
Yes. Welcome to Hanging with An and Kim. It's like, what time is it? 2 a.m. in the morning?
2:12 a.m.
2:12 a.m. in the morning. We're on the night shift hanging out. We have a very special guest, Kim Dow. She is the chief of the residency program. We are both residents at Swedish First Health. And today we're going to get to know Kim, how she came to be in this amazing program, how she rose all the way to the top position, and what are her plans in the next year. So, Kim, why don't you tell us a little about yourself? Where are you from, Kim?
I was born in California. I lived there for 9 years. And then we moved around for a year from California, a little from Cerritos and Burbank. And then we left to Virginia, and then we went to New Hampshire, and then we ended up in Maine. And I lived there through college.
Wow. So all the four corners of the United States, you've been, and now you're here. Mm-hmm. You were probably the only Vietnamese person in New Hampshire. Which is always just funny to think about it. But when did you first know you're like, I think I'm going to be a doctor growing up?
I don't know. I do know I wanted to be a dentist when I was younger because of my lack of front teeth for over a year. It was an unusual amount of time to not have front teeth.
How many 20 years?
It was like just over a year. You know that song, like, all I want for Christmas are my two front
that's funny.
teeth? That was my jam for like 2 years. For like 2 years.
Yeah.
But I think maybe sometime in 6th grade.
6th grade.
Because it's very specific.
Yeah.
Because
let's hear it.
My parents worked at a nail salon, and I knew how to paint nails because I had to go on the weekends and paint ladies' toenails and clean the pedicure chairs. But my middle school was near a nursing home, so when I would walk to school, we would pass it, and so I just went in one day and asked if I could volunteer, and they said, "Can you do anything?" And I said, "I can paint nails." And so I painted nails and played bingos with old ladies, and I just I just saw them get their meds and stuff, and I was like, oh, I want to help people and do stuff with people.
That's awesome. I actually never knew that story about you.
Yeah, I don't think anyone does in our program.
Oh, yeah, it's a super Vietnamese story. It's a super Vietnamese story. From nails to stethoscope. It's a big, wow, that's incredible. And then you went, where'd you go to med school?
I went to Tufts. So when I was in high school, my guidance counselor knew that I wanted to go into medical school. And so my junior year, he was like, what are you thinking? And I was like, I don't know. I just want to be a doctor. So he told me about a vocational program. So I was trained to be a CNA. And then he told me that the University of Maine had a partnership with Tufts Medical School. Since Maine doesn't have a allopathic medical school, you can go to Tufts. You can apply early during your sophomore year. And if you meet their requirements and keep your GPA up, you can get into Tufts and you don't have to take the MCAT.
I'm going to adjust this. You're the more star of the show. So I didn't know that there was a connection between Maine and Tufts.
Yep, so that's why I went there.
And you're in family medicine, so the East Coast is not generally, what we think of when we think of family medicine. But Tufts specifically, though, seems to have a really strong family medicine presence there. Yeah.
The Cambridge Health Alliance and Tufts has a pretty strong family medicine program. I actually didn't know about family medicine until my senior year of college. So I already knew because I did the early assurance program, and so I knew I was going to medical school. And then my senior year before medical school, I spent some time with some rural docs, and that's when I was introduced to the concept of family medicine, because I had no idea that was even a thing.
Yeah. Did you have a family medicine doc growing up? Like, who did you go?
I had a pediatrician growing up,
Okay.
and I thought I wanted to be a pediatrician.
Yeah, same here. So you were first. When did you first know that that's like a thing that you could be and do?
When right before med school, I spent some time with it was called Medical Outreach Maine, and they said I'd be shadowing a physician, and that physician happened to be a family medicine doc.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. And so now you went from Maine to Boston to all the way over to Seattle. Mm-hmm. How did you hear about Swedish as a program?
My mentor during my 4th year, so I did like the longitudinal program. So instead of doing all the like block rotations, we just did all of them for the 9 months or 12 whatever months it was. And so I had a family medicine doc that I worked with for the entire time, and he was awesome. And he was actually one of the chief residents at the Swedish, the old Providence family medicine program here.
Oh, on the other side?
The new Cherry Hill.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
yeah.
And he was like, I don't know what they're called now because it doesn't exist. And so I had no idea, and I thought it was actually First Hill.
Yeah, I was like, what?
And then I looked them up, and then Kyle was like, I want to go to the Pacific Northwest because I want to be a pilot. And so it just kind of worked out.
So Kyle, tell us about Kyle, the sweetheart, the Clark Kent of the program.
The Clark Kent. We went in college, and we were friends first. Started dating, we were married, and he's just awesome. He's a very thoughtful person. Probably the most thoughtful person. Not necessarily in terms of like, I feel like when people say thoughtful, they're like, oh, like she like held the door open for me, or they bought me this treat because it reminded of them. I don't mean that kind of thoughtful, although sometimes that happens. He's very inquisitive and is very passionate about finding out what the truth is and the evolving truths of the world. Yeah. Like he's not religious. I don't know if you know this. So he still goes to church with me when I go. Mm-hmm. And he has been reading more religious texts than I ever have. Like, he has explored Catholicism way more than I have ever even thought about it. Growing up in a Vietnamese Catholic community, family, it's just, it's what you do. You go to church, and that is just how you are raised, and you just kind of accept it. And he has, like, taken this to, like, a whole nother level. He's written, like, blogs and essays about like Catholicism and is exploring it, and but he's not Catholic though, but he really throws himself into it.
Wow, that's a strong commitment.
Yeah.
So tell us how you met and who made the first move.
I think we technically first crossed paths in student government. It was our freshman year. He was dating someone and I was dating someone from high school. We were both dating who we dated in high school. And so we were just friends all during probably like late fall of our freshman year, and just were friends and then sophomore year, we just started hanging out more. We ended up having a class together. We still did student government together. We were in these like honors tradition societies that worked together a lot, and we're really good friends. And then we're like, oh, we like each other. So then
no, you got to give me a little more detail than that. Who was the person to be like, yo?
Oh, okay. Well, technically, the first time we so this was in the springtime springtime of our freshman year. So we knew each other through student government, but then we had honors classes together, and he gets very lost in his thoughts and was like staring at me during when the teacher was like, oh, we have a project. If you want to work together with somebody, you can. It could be a multi-person project or you could do it independently. And when I looked up, he was looking at me. So I was like, oh, he's shy. He wants a partner, but doesn't want to like ask me.
But he's trying to holler.
So then I emailed him and he had no idea what I was talking about because he doesn't realize when he stares at people. And his like hallway people were like, oh my gosh, she likes you, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, oh, I actually don't want a partner for this, but will you help me with this other thing? And then we started hanging out more when I helped him with something else for our like honors curriculum.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess I technically made the effort to befriend him more than he did myself.
All right. You mean he's a good looking guy. Yeah, I can't blame you for that. When did you guys get married? During med school?
The end of med school.
The end of med school. Okay. Cool. And he had I think he had a pretty cool job. Tell us about his job. Oh,
yes. Okay. So to preface his job in Maine, so when we were in Boston, so my program with the partnership with Tufts in Maine, we spent 2 years in Boston and then 2 years in Maine for the clinicals. But in Boston, he was a paralegal for 2 years, and it drove him flipping crazy.
Just doing paperwork all day?
He definitely developed good, administrative skills and became a better writer just from the process of having to, condense what he got from the lawyers. But he went crazy. He was like, I'm too young to be working in an office. And so our roommate at the time, who was actually a friend from undergrad, who was living with us, he grew up lobstering because that's what you do when you live on the coast of Maine.
Yeah.
You just get into lobstering. And so Kyle was just like, I think I'm going to be a lobsterman. And it was funny because we spoke with people and everyone was like, unless you have a family connection, it's really hard to get into it because people are very hesitant about their lobster license. And to get your own license is hard too. So everyone was like, you can't do it, Kyle, you can't do it. You got to know somebody. Multiple people told him, but he was like, I'm going to do it. And then when we got to coastal Maine, his mom, one of my friends, her mom was just like, oh, you should check the local newspaper and see if anyone did a posting there.
Oh, wow.
And so he did, and there was. And this person is notorious for hiring new people every year because one, you can train them how you want, and two, no one ever wants to come back because he is such a classic old curmudgeon Mainer who's not very nice on the boats. But Kyle actually got along with him a lot. They had some up and downs, but they are still in contact today. So he...
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he did lobstering. So it's called inshore lobstering, which is basically when it's about 3 miles from the shoreline. So that's inshore lobstering. So he did that for a season. And then during that time, he heard about offshore fishing, offshore lobster fishing. And that's very lucrative during specific seasons.
Yeah.
And so he's like, I want to do that. And so he just started driving down to New Hampshire. So it was an 1.5-hour drive just to get to the dock, but he did it for multiple days and weekends and would help them what we call offload, which is basically going onto the boat and bringing off the lobsters and their traps. And he just said, hey, my name's Kyle. I do inshore lobstering. I would love to come on your
lobsters.
boat.
Wow, that's a baller move.
And eventually someone was like, all right, we'll take you on.
Yeah.
And so...
Nice.
Yeah. So he did offshore lobstering, kind of like the whole deadliest catch thing. They'd go off for 7 to 10 days and then would be fishing. He's worked 24+ hour days, Jesus. Very grueling, had the craziest... prepatellar bursitis I'd ever seen. It was literally the size of a softball. I had measured it. And I was like, I think you should stop for a little bit. It was really impressive.
Yeah.
And so he did that for on and off. He was the sixth man, if you will.
Yeah.
He would just kind of be the floater, and he did that for a little over 1.5 years.
Cool. And I think one of the big selling points of the program is that we have a lobster connection. So
we do.
If you come here, you can obviously get a good supply of lobster.
Oh my gosh.
And you actually bought lobster to your intern retreat.
Yep.
Right. So let's talk about intern year.
Mm-hmm.
So how is it, it's been over a year now since you've been an intern and you've been a senior, and I think you've been able to see how us as interns, how we grow and how we develop. So what was the most memorable thing to you about intern year? And was there anything that surprised you or something that you really had a hard time with?
Everyone keeps telling you that you're going to learn the things and that you know more than you think you do. And I think all of us definitely came in with like imposter syndrome, and we still have that on and off. But I think the difference of me coming in as a fresh intern at Greenhorn, and then at the end of intern year, and then senioring for the first time, you could see why that statement is true, that you really do know more than you think you do. So yeah, I think that was nice, right? It's like, oh, wait, I did learn something. Because sometimes, like, at the beginning of intern year, it's like, I'm not learning anything. I'm being like, this is worse than med school, of being given all this information and just not thinking that you're retaining it.
It's hard to know what you're learning sometimes. Yeah. And I feel like there's just so much being like poured on you every day. You're just having so many experiences. Sometimes it's hard to know until you kind of look back and think like, oh, you're put in a new situation and you're like, oh, I learned, using my previous experiences, I know what to do now.
Yeah.
And how do you like your class? I know how much you like your class. Your class obviously know how much you like your class.
Oh my goodness.
Tell us about your class and your experience with your co-interns and how that's been for you.
So I think I've been very fortunate in that every kind of part of my life I have like retained friendships from high school, college, med school, and every time you develop relationships like that, when you bond over the hardships and the struggles and the joys, it's like, wow, I'm never going to have another group like this again. And that is just not true. I came here, to be honest, so this is actually what I tell interviewees sometimes, like during the interview season, when people are like, how did you know? Like, what were your concerns? What'd you think? And like, did you go with your gut? And to be honest, when I first had my interview here, I vibed with some people, and then other people I was like, wow, these are not my people. Like, I don't know what to do. Like, this is like on paper my number one choice. But when you get along with some people and other people, you're just like, we're not on the same wavelength at all. I was really worried. But Swedish First Hill I thought was the best program in terms of like quality. And I was like, well, I'm a generally adaptable person. If these aren't my people, that's okay, because I'm still going to get the best training here. And so just looking at the curriculum, I was like, I think this is the right spot for me, not necessarily because of the people, which is what you always hear for some reason. It's like, go where you like the people. But I just was like, well, I usually like everyone, so I'll just go with the curriculum that looks like the best and where I think I'll have the best training. And I was really nervous, because then, of course, I matched here, and I was like, oh my gosh, am I going to even like these people? And I could not believe how fast we just like bonded as a class. I think part of that too is probably because we don't have any cis males in our class. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. I don't think it's necessarily either, but it does, I think, contribute to our dynamic. Kyle laughs because he is just like, you are such a different person when you're with your residents. I think...
Oh, your voice goes up an octave and much louder and everything. So.
Yes. I am very extra when I'm with my co-residents, and I think when we're together individually on like a serious basis, we aren't like that, but I think it just makes us laugh to be a little over the top. But they are all so smart, kind, funny people. It's like shocking to me. I'm still learning stuff about them, and they're still like amaze me flipping every single time we hang out.
So what I always am curious about is what happens when you guys aren't happy with each other. It does seem like that sometimes there are a little bit of like conflicts here and there, and you guys seem pretty open about it when you guys talk about it at Balint. So, without going into any specifics, like how was that something that you found like something came naturally just for folks to bring up conflicts during these events, and how did that come to be?
Yeah, I mean, I will bring up a specific situation because I think this is actually the first time that it did happen to me was actually during senior year. Because I think, or this second year, because as an intern, I think you're just like trying to stay afloat and learn as much as you can. And even though you're interacting with your fellow interns, you have your own patients. So it's not like you're working directly with them. And usually you just kind of commiserate together of like, oh my gosh, this patient did this, and this patient did this. Or like, my senior's being a jerk. And it's like, oh, they're being a jerk to me too. And when you're a senior, though, you get more transfer of care and you have to work together and divvy stuff up. And I think during this year, I had a particularly hard, one of the night shifts, we had like multiple admissions, things going on in the ICU, like, I don't know if there was an OB. It was just like everything that could happen happened. And then what followed was when we were like looking at a patient, I saw that another one of our patients was in the ICU, but we hadn't been informed of them. And long story short, I just kind of gave the morning team like an FYI at the end of my sign out, which usually after like a long shift, you just want to give your sign out and be done and leave. It's like, I need to decompress, not here. And because of the chaos of the night, there were just like comments and it kind of went on, and there were many questions that I was like, this has nothing to do with this. I just want to get through this. And I just kind of like looked at them and I was just like, it was funny. The intern that I was working with was livid for me on my behalf. But I was just like, it's not worth it. Like, let's just go home. And it was interesting, though, because before I even got a chance to, like, say anything, I, like, received messages. And it's like, hey, sorry about this morning. Because, like, just looking at them, they knew that I was upset. But I was like, this isn't the time and place to be doing this. I need to get people signed out so they can do their work. And it's been nice because people just, I think because we are so close, or not even that, I think just family medicine people generally have a sense of how people are feeling. And so they texted me and apologized, like, hey, sorry about, like, the sign out. Didn't mean to, like, drag it on, or hope you didn't feel attacked. You did a great job. But I think in other times, I think usually we just say it kind of straight out. That's kind of what I like about our program in general. Most people are very receptive to like on the spot feedback or like close feedback of so but venting still happens.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, I mean, it seems like you guys already had like somewhat of a solid foundation upon which that was built during intern year, upon which you can kind of both understand each other during senior year and also kind of have that connection to build on, to have those lines of communication. What has been the hardest part of senioring? I personally value feedback, and I'm always trying to seek it. But it's hard because not everyone feels that way, and not everyone is confident in their skills at various point in their training. And I think trying to remember that and not force learning and feedback on people, and just trying to meet them where they're at. But at the same time, I think our generation, we're just so sensitive, and we like need to be able to like learn to take it. Like, we need to be able to function under stressful times and receive on the spot feedback when it's appropriate, even though it doesn't feel good. And I think I'm trying to find that balance of like giving people feedback when they have the space to, but also being like, you know what, this is really important. I know this is hard for you to hear right now, but it needs to happen. I think that's a hard part about senioring, and the balance of we need to get this work done, but I also
want you to feel confident. Like in the beginning of the year, I know like I personally felt as an intern and then reversed, like if I wasn't being fast enough, I would be like, oh, my senior did this. Like, does this mean like I'm incompetent?
Yeah. You make me feel that way all the time. No. You're like, oh my gosh, you did everything already.
And like the hard part is funny. Like that's the job as a senior though. It's like you have this, you allow for a certain amount of time, but it's not, and that's what it was. I like understood it once I became a senior. It's not a reflection on the quality of the intern. It's just you have to learn how to process, and if you just let them go, or if they let me just go, it's like I will just sit there and be in a rabbit hole and chart review. Like I need to, you just need to hold people accountable, and sometimes they'll hurt their feelings, and that's okay. Yeah,
it's so funny you say that. The first day I worked with you, I remember like we were doing an admission, and like before I had like finished looking up this patient, I feel like you had already like the sign out was done, and like you already had all the problems gathered, and I was like, oh my god, I'm so slow.
You were slow. And then it wasn't you.
And it's kind of crazy because it's like I think as an intern, you see as like, oh, I have all these things that I have to do, and there's so much I have to do. But then as a senior, like, okay, this is kind of more like a team thing where, you know, we have all these things to get done together. And so it's one of the things that like it's harder to look at as an intern. I always like one of our faculty, Miranda, the way she gives feedback is where she like lets you know, at the beginning of the day, this is how she's going to give feedback, and kind of like almost getting your consent to give you on the spot feedback. And, you know, I feel like if most people are like aware that it's coming, then they're a little bit more receptive to it. And I always like that way of giving feedback a lot more. The hard thing though is like the days that you need the feedback the most, I feel like are the days that there's the least time to give feedback. Yeah. Right? Because on the days where you have like 4 admissions, you know, things are everywhere, you're having computer problems, you know, you're having issues like getting the medical records, and like your sign out is like 2 hours late, and it's hard to like, hey, do you have time for some feedback? You know, so how have you managed like the crazy days?
I always try to find at least like one pearl, so even if it's not like the full like review of somebody's H&P or their exam or something, like I always try to find like one thing. Towards the end of the year, I don't do it as much because I feel like, I know at my point at the end of the year for my intern year, I was like, I'm good. I don't have a space for that right now. I don't want feedback. I'm trying to stay afloat. But I think that was like my goal basically for every shift. And I just made that a priority. And I would tell my interns like, hey, I'm going to try to give you feedback at some point on your note, your exam, and your H&Ps. And at least try to drop little pearls or be like, this is how I do this. You don't have to do this. So just some form of teaching or feedback every day. And I think just having that goal of like one thing. It can be small, big, whatever.
Yeah. So you kind of moved into a new city, Seattle. Have you been to Seattle before? You came to Swedish and interviewed here?
Only for the interviews.
Yeah.
This is the last corner.
How has Seattle been as a city for you? Is there anything that surprised you in particular about Seattle?
Yeah.
Let it rip.
My 3 a.m. brain will be less filtered than it normally is. I think I was just surprised. So statistically, like on paper, I was looking for a more diverse place to be. So I grew up in California in a very Vietnamese dense community, but beyond that, it was more than that. I was around Asians, Hispanics, Blacks, like white people, a variety of different races and socioeconomic status as well, a range. And then when I moved to Maine, that it was at the time the whitest state in the country. It is now number 2 instead of number 1, I think. And then my parents live in Georgia, South now. So very diverse there as well. And so when I was looking for residency programs, I wanted to just be in an area that had more cultural diversity, racial diversity, since I'd kind of missed that during my time in Maine. And really kind of looking actually specifically for cities that had a very strong Vietnamese presence, just basically an attempt to reconnect with my culture. And I love that aspect of Seattle, but I did not expect to be so aware of my race here, if that makes sense. Like in Maine, it was like expected. So like teachers always knew my name pretty quick. Kim, very Asian name, only Asian person. I was very used to being the only Asian person, like in class or at a restaurant or having people look at me. And then I just like got used to it, and to a point that I like didn't even notice at all. And now, but when I came here, for some reason, I felt the segregation more of like communities than I did before, and that race just seemed like a more important thing here, which was weird. I don't know if that's because of like the wokeness of this city or what, but it was weird. And I had talked to like other people about it. I was just like, it's just me, or I still can't quite put my finger on it. I really have enjoyed living here. If I had more family here, I could see myself being somewhere in like the greater Seattle area. But yeah, the access to the outdoors, very awesome. The food is good, although you have to work a little harder to find the good spots, I think. And yeah, the weather actually doesn't bother me very much. I kind of find it like a little bit romantic, like the
gray.
The gray. No, but
Kim's shades of gray in Seattle.
I felt it a little more. I think I felt the whole daylight saving things a little harder this year, but during intern year. But maybe it's because I was just in the hospital always, so I didn't like notice how gloomy it was. I don't know.
Yeah. It's I grew up in Seattle, and it's a really odd thing where it was like the area where I hung out a lot was both really diverse and also really segregated at the same time, where you can like clearly see every group is hanging out with each group.
Yeah, tribalism very strong.
Yeah, and so now that you're here, you're kind of in an interesting point in the Seattle area where a lot of the communities are moving outside of the city simply because we just can't afford it anymore. And so, that's kind of the big trend that you're kind of moving into. And I feel like you've really kind of embraced like your Vietnamese, heritage and like really appreciated it. Like you're like taking Vietnamese classes, you're like really involved with your Vietnamese patients. You're really trying your best to, pick up, the language wherever you can. And I really admire that. And, a lot of folks kind of take it for granted where, they have this background, but it's like, I feel like growing up, we were always like, it was always, being Vietnamese was always sometimes a little bit shameful because you were different, different foods that smelled weird. You had the Nick Mum that like stunk up the lunchroom, and sometimes your pants were too high or your clothes were too weird. But, it's at this point where you've kind of come full circle where you've really like learned to love who you are.
Yeah.
And Seattle's kind of like had, one of the bigger Vietnamese communities in the country. And yeah, tell us about your work with how you got involved, like how you even found these like Vietnamese classes, and like how you like made a lot of actually Vietnamese connections around the city.
I specifically picked this area because of the program, but the reason why I looked at it as well was I wanted to be in a Vietnamese dense place, and so I already knew there would be resources, and so I basically just Googled things, to be honest. And then once I like found connections, I started following them on social media, and just that led me to other things. And so I think the first thing was really with the food, just being able to eat Vietnamese food more easily and not having to cook it or like go very far was awesome. And then from there, basically befriending people who are Vietnamese in the community. Hugh from Cherry Hill
Yeah.
is an R3 and I'm an R2. And so when I became Facebook friends with him, he started posting lots of resources. And so basically every time he posted something, I would follow that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And so that's how I first found out about the classes. And so Little Friends of Little Saigon partnered with another organization basically to have these classes. And so that was when I took on the classes, which was last winter. And so that was a 10-week course. And so it was a language and cultural class. And then from there, I made friends with other like first generation American Vietnamese folks that are around our age. And then once I like friended them, I started following the things that they posted. So like movies, documentaries, shows. And so that we go out to eat, we watch documentaries, we talk about said documentaries, we go to different events, try to volunteer at those events. And there's always something going on, which is awesome. And then there's the Vietnamese church, which I haven't gotten super involved with, but it was nice to go before like the COVID stuff. And just being able to like eat my Vietnamese food after my church. Yeah. Like that was so nice growing up, and it's nice being able to return to that. Yeah. So yeah, it's it's you know, it's I feel like it's not always recognized, but or taught of, you know, how do we bring a resident into a new city, and how do we immerse them in the community that's there and teach them about the culture, and how do we train residents to kind of be a part of the community that they are. And I feel like you model that really well, and really, you know, demonstrate that. And I feel like if, you know, I think it's a good model that I would love to like replicate or kind of teach the new interns of like, hey, you know, this is how you get to know where you're at, who's there, how you get involved in not just the food, but also the culture, the history, and everything there. And speaking of the new interns, so I would like, you know, how is the process of like choosing interns? So tell me about, you know, tell me about, you know, what you're most excited for. Because now you've been through an intern year, you've been through senior year, you're going to go through chief year. And so, you know, this is going to be the second class that you welcome. Yeah. So what are you most excited for the new incoming class? I'm just really excited to get to know them as like individuals. As an intern, so when I started, I was like super nervous meeting like my class, and then even more so like the R2s and the R3s. I was like, I'm gonna have nothing in common with them. I'm too young, I'm too dumb, I don't know anything, I'm too much. And just like every time I had a shift with somebody, I would just get to learn such cool, interesting things. Everybody in this program, I'm just like, wow, we are so lucky to have this person. So I'm really just excited to get to know them as people. And I think my class has learned as a class not to be so pushy. So I think
you guys love each other so much.
We will encourage and help foster an environment for bonding, but maybe not be such like helicopter seniors and chiefs.
Y'all helicopter parents.
We were like, why aren't you hugging each other every time? Why aren't you hanging out every second of the day? So we'll back off.
So you're not just going to be a third year chief. You are one of the program resident chiefs. So what made you even consider taking this job? Because it's a lot of responsibilities. It's a lot of administrative work, really, and I feel like doctors always tend to want to shy away from administrative work. So tell us about that.
I think my class just kind of had a joke about it initially during intern year. Like when we were planning our first like R1 retreat, I just was trying to facilitate things because I just heard that retreats like where the magic happens and it's really fun and all this stuff. And so I was like, all right, we got to make sure it's fun. And so I think just like growing up, I was like the mediator in our family of 4/5, count my cousin. And I don't know, just in high school, you take on leadership roles and it's just something that you're kind of used to doing. So I was like, here's a Google Doc, sign up for like who's coming, what you're bringing, what you want to do. And so when other opportunities presented itself, I would offer to do things and help facilitate. And so, you know, we would joke like, oh, Kim, you're going to be chief and whatever. And I was like, whatever. Like, whoever's it, they're all going to do a good job. I'm not worried about it. And I feel very, very lucky. It was actually fun. I was like reading my chief statement. And
Excel sheets.
And I was... it was just very funny. I was like, I think I need to tone this down a little bit. I am very, you could like hear my tone. I was just, it's like I'm yelling.
You're screaming through the screen.
I don't know. I love this program so much. And even though there are always areas that we need to improve, I just see so much opportunity for growth. And I just see such amazing people that I really just want to help people reach their full potential. I want to reach my full potential. And I just see such great opportunity here. And I really wanted to play a pivotal role if I could, because I knew I could bring that energy. But honestly, I love my class. And I was like, I know we're going to be in good hands no matter what. And sure. I will put my energy wherever it is, whether it's in one role or another. So yeah, I was lucky enough.
So our program kind of stands at, you know, a big point of change where we're in the middle of finding a new program director, and I feel like that leaves a lot of space for residents to lead a lot of change. So tell us, you know, what are the things you're working on over the next year? And where you hope to take the program, you know, not only this year, but where do you hope to set us up for, you know, years down the road?
I think, like, even in the taking a step back, looking at the grander context of things, of just Swedish was bought out or partnered, however you want to frame it, by Providence. We had a transition of program directors. We've had a lot of internal changes as well. And I think during times of transitioning, there's a lot of uncertainty. And I think one of the things that I'm working on and that I'm hoping for is to help people learn to deal and cope with the uncertainty while we try to figure out what we want as a program. We started, and we're very well known for our inpatient service, our procedures, our breadth of family medicine. Family medicine already in its nature is full spectrum, but we take that to heart. I mean, from the OB experience, you get to the geriatric experience. And I think that's a real struggle too, though, because when you want to do everything, that means that you have less time for everything because there's so many subjects. And part of that also is like the quality of the teaching is going to be driven by the faculty, just by the nature of continuity. And so trying to figure out, you know, who's going to be the champion of each thing. I think we have so many strong components, but I do think there's definitely a danger in trying to be the best at everything, because you can't, and that's okay too. Like, it's okay to be really good at a lot of things. And I think that's the struggle that we are always dealing with as family medicine doctors, is being okay with being just the jack of all trades and not the expert. But I think all of our hearts are in the right place. And I think especially as we are moving towards being a more, I don't know, quite like a program that reflects the community that it serves, there are going to be some ugly things that we have to address. And that's okay. And it's okay to find the spots that we need to improve in, and I think we're slowly revealing those, but it's uncomfortable, right? It's like, we talk about like anti-racism work, but when you look at our faculty and residents, historically, we have not been that racially diverse, at least. I think we have always had, or not always, like for at least my almost 3 years, there's usually like a very strong LGBTQ plus presence, and I think that's also kind of like reflective of how strong our curriculum is in that. But I think as we try to work towards being more a part of our community, focusing on like anti-racism work, community medicine, like family medicine, all these things are intertwined, and I think trying to bring that to the surface more in addition to, you know, like learning to be excellent clinicians. And I think that's like the hard part. Like, how do we balance that? I think our hearts are in the right place. I think we need to be careful about how we move forward, but I think this will be for the better, even though it will be very uncomfortable. I think for like probably a few years before you really kind of settle into something, and we've learned a lot of things along the way, even though we're only like really a few years into making the big steps of trying to become a more diverse and program that's very more aware of like the community that we serve.
Yeah. So yeah, it's really hard to try to be the best at everything. And I feel like we just love everything so much. Yeah, and I feel I do agree with you on things that we had to work on. And you know, I think it's a big thing that our applicants look for as well too. Is, you know, do they feel like they belong here? And do they feel like they have a good place here? So last question. So what is the one thing that you would brag about our program? If you were to brag about one thing,
so many things.
You know, there's so many things, right? Like either, you know, about the curriculum, people, like what is one thing where you go to the conferences, you recruit people, you know, what is the one thing that you can really happily brag that we do really well, or that's really one of the best parts of our program?
Oh man, this is so cheesy and cliche, but I have to say the people, because it's not just the residents, it's the faculty, it's the staff, it's our patients. I have, with my interviews and like researching programs, talking to fellow friends from med school who are also in family medicine programs, I have never met staff and faculty that are just so involved. Like, what other residency has like a band that comes and gets together and plays music together and puts on musical performances? Like our retreats, like Fort Warden. So when I heard about it, I was like, okay, like a retreat. I think it's like an ACGME like mandatory thing now. I'm not sure about that, but I feel like I heard that once upon a time. It's like it's not mandatory for you to attend, but like that is the event that we look forward to every year. Like, what other programs host like faculty like dinners with the residents and staff like multiple times a year? It's just, they are just so invested in us, not only as clinicians but people, and it's just everyone is always looking out for each other, not just the residents looking out for each other, not just the staff or the faculty. And I think that's another thing too. I think we're very close with our staff, which I think is awesome, because they are very much part of this program as much as we are, even more so because they are like the foundation for it. They are the continuity for the residency. So it's really cool to be with people who constantly make you want to be like a better person, a better doctor, better friend, and you're pushed to be the best that you can, right, when you're around people like that. Like on last night when we were talking about stuff, I was just like, holy cow, On is so smart and thoughtful. I literally was talking to Kyle about that. I was like, Kyle, I had no idea. Like, because you and I haven't really... but like, you and I have never really like hung out in like you and I have worked together, and then we've gone to like social outings together where people are talking amongst each other and like we're playing games and there's alcohol involved, but like we haven't like actually sat down and had like a serious conversation. And like I feel like this happens like multiple times with like people that I'm on call with, especially on nights. It's like, wow, you learn about the things that people have gone through, and it's just like, oh my gosh, I'm lucky to be in their presence. And I mean that genuinely. I know I'm a very over-the-top person, but it's because I feel these emotions very strongly when I meet you guys. But it's not with everybody. It's not. People think that because they're like, you love everyone. I'm like, that's not true. Like, it's just that you all just happen to be very impressive, and I can't hold my emotions. Like, it's really awesome. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
So, thanks for having this chat, Kim. It's like, what time is it? It's like, it's 3:01 a.m.
Oh my gosh.
And yeah, So we are about a week away from welcoming the new interns, and she literally could not hold her excitement any longer. So I don't know. You think, how was the format? This is
awesome.
No,
I love
like
this.
I mean, we can chat. And, you know, it's a little weird when the camera's on, but I feel like
I try just to look at you. It makes me feel less awkward.
well, yeah, you know, I
Just
guess.
look down.
And so I'm probably gonna have to edit this, and yeah, we'll go from there. So hopefully we can get more interviews of residents. I just love hearing you guys' stories and where you're from and about your partners, and you know, hopefully what you plan to do in the future. So I hope to get more of these interviews. Probably try to get some faculty as well. You know, in the future, like what I would really love to do is like, you know, have these talks with patients.
Yeah.
And really like take the long time to, you know, see where they're really from, the part they're at. So, yeah, hopefully that will happen over the next year. So thank you everybody for watching. There's no YouTube channel that exists. Eventually there will be. I'll post it on something, and yeah, check it out. So have a good one.